Imagine if the secret to slowing down aging, boosting your energy, improving your digestion, protecting your brain, and lowering your risk for major diseases wasn't a supplement, wasn't a medication, and wasn't some complicated routine, but a tiny microorganism living inside your gut. And the craziest part, most people are losing this bacteria every single day without even realizing it. Today, I want to show you the gut bacteria that science keeps pointing to, the one linked to longevity, and exactly what you need to eat to grow it naturally. When people talk about anti-aging, they usually think of lotions, creams, peptides, or expensive treatments. But aging actually begins in the gut. Almost 80% of your immune system is there, your inflammation levels are controlled there, your nutrient absorption starts there, and the chemicals that keep your brain young, like serotonin, GABA, and even certain growth factors, are influenced by what's happening in your gut microbiome. So if the gut is aging fast, the rest of your body has no choice but to follow. There's one strain that keeps coming up again and again in longevity research, Akkermansia eosinophila. It's a mouthful, but here's what makes it incredible. This bacteria strengthens the gut lining, helps reduce chronic inflammation, improves insulin sensitivity, and even helps reduce the accumulation of visceral fat, the dangerous kind that surrounds your organs. Higher levels of this bacteria are consistently found in people who live longer and age slower. Lower levels are found in people who struggle with metabolic issues, stubborn belly fat, autoimmune conditions, and even early cognitive decline. One of the most important things Akkermansia does is repair your gut lining. Think of your gut lining as a protective wall. When this wall gets thin or damaged, which happens from sugar, seed oils, stress, low-fiber diets, alcohol, medications, and processed foods, you start leaking inflammatory molecules into your bloodstream. That's called metabolic endotoxemia, and it accelerates aging faster than almost anything else. It affects your joints, your skin, your heart, and your brain. Akkermansia thrives on strengthening that wall, thickening the protective mucus layer, and lowering inflammation at the source. But here's the problem: most people have very low levels of Akkermansia, especially after age 40, and if you're eating the standard modern diet, your levels drop even faster. This is why you can eat healthy, take supplements, and still feel like your metabolism and energy aren't improving. You're missing the foundation. Now, the good news is that you can grow this bacteria naturally without buying expensive probiotic pills, simply by eating specific foods. Akkermansia doesn't feed on fiber like many other gut bacteria. It feeds on polyphenols, the deep-colored plant compounds that act as natural antioxidants. Polyphenols aren't just nutrients, they're signals. They tell your microbiome to shift toward a younger profile. Foods that feed Akkermansia the best include pomegranate, cranberry, blueberry, green tea, cacao, blackcurrants, red onions, and certain spices like cloves and cinnamon. You don't need large amounts. You just need consistency. Even a small serving of these foods can increase Akkermansia populations within days, and the effects on inflammation and metabolism can show up surprisingly fast. Another powerful category is prebiotic-resistant starch. This includes cooked and cooled potatoes, cooked and cooled rice, green bananas, and oats that have been soaked overnight. Resistant starch bypasses digestion and reaches the colon, where it fuels beneficial microbes and shifts the overall gut environment toward a healthier, anti-inflammatory state, making it easier for Akkermansia to grow. But here's something people rarely hear: Akkermansia thrives when you give your gut periods of rest. Intermittent fasting, or simply extending your time between meals, allows the bacteria to expand and repair the gut lining. It's one of the reasons fasting reduces inflammation so quickly. The bacteria that support longevity are the ones that thrive when you're not constantly eating. There are also foods that drastically reduce Akkermansia, and cutting them out can be just as important as adding the right foods in. High processed sugar, seed oils, artificial sweeteners, large amounts of alcohol, and ultra-processed snacks damage the gut lining and feed inflammatory microbes that compete with Akkermansia. Many people clean up their diet but still consume hidden gut disruptors, like certain emulsifiers that appear in packaged foods, which slowly thin the mucus layer. This is why people can feel older than they are, even when their lifestyle looks healthy. When people start repairing their gut microbiome, they often report surprising changes: clearer skin, better joint comfort, less bloating, more steady energy throughout the day, sharper thinking, even better stress tolerance. This is because your gut bacteria produce compounds that communicate directly with your brain and immune system. When Akkermansia is thriving, your inflammation drops and your cells can repair themselves more efficiently. If you're looking for the simplest place to start, it's this: try adding one polyphenol-rich food every day. A handful of blueberries with your breakfast, a cup of green tea in the afternoon, a tablespoon of pomegranate seeds, a square of real dark chocolate with at least 85% cacao. When you do this consistently, the bacteria begin to repopulate. Pair that with eating less often, maybe shift to 2 or 3 meals instead of constant snacking, and you're giving your gut the exact environment it needs to rebuild. Your gut is like a garden. If you give it the right food, the right environment, and the right rhythm, the bacteria that slow aging and protect you from disease naturally start to dominate. Your immune system becomes calmer, your metabolism becomes more efficient, your body starts burning fat easier, your mind becomes clearer. And most importantly, you stop the silent inflammation that accelerates aging behind the scenes. You don't need complicated routines. You don't need expensive supplements. You just need to feed the bacteria that keep you young. And the foods that help them thrive are simple, affordable, and easy to add to your daily routine. When people think about aging, they usually think about wrinkles, gray hair, sore joints, slower metabolism, and low energy. But what very few people realize is that aging actually starts deep inside the gut long before you ever see it on the outside. And one of the biggest players in this entire process is a microscopic organism most people have never heard of: Akkermansia mucinifera. This tiny gut bacteria has become one of the most talked about microbes in the world of longevity science because the more researchers study it, the more they realize it is directly connected to how fast or slow your body ages. Imagine if there was a species in your gut whose whole job was to keep your immune system calm, your inflammation low, your metabolism efficient, your gut lining strong, and your fat-burning hormones working the way they're supposed to. That's what Akkermansia does. It's like the quiet guardian of your gut. And when it's present in healthy amounts, your entire body functions in a younger, more resilient way. But when it's low or missing, which is true for a lot of people, your body starts aging faster, inflammation rises, digestion weakens, and metabolic problems become much easier to develop. One of the most important things about Akkermansia is that it helps maintain and repair the mucus layer that protects your gut lining. Think of your gut lining as a barrier between your internal world and the outside world. It absorbs nutrients, blocks toxins, and communicates with your immune system. But that lining is extremely thin, only one cell thick. If it gets inflamed or damaged, things like undigested food particles, bacterial toxins, and inflammatory molecules can leak into your bloodstream. This condition is often referred to as intestinal permeability or a weakening of the protective barrier. And when that happens, your immune system becomes activated and stays activated. This chronic, low-grade inflammation is one of the biggest accelerators of aging. Akkermansia plays a special role here. Unlike other bacteria that feed on fiber, Akkermansia feeds on the mucus layer itself. That might sound strange. Why would we want a bacteria eating our mucus? But it turns out that this process actually triggers the production of fresh, thicker, healthier mucus, which reinforces the integrity of the gut. It's similar to pruning a plant so it grows back stronger. The presence of Akkermansia signals your body to rebuild and strengthen the gut barrier. And the stronger your gut barrier is, the lower your inflammation will be. Inflammation is one of the most reliable markers of biological aging. When inflammation is high, your cells don't repair themselves properly. Your mitochondria produce less energy, your joints become stiffer, your skin loses elasticity faster, your brain fog increases, and your metabolism slows down. This is why people who have strong populations of Akkermansia tend to have younger biological ages than their actual age. Their inflammation is under control and their gut barrier is intact. Another fascinating thing about this bacteria is its effect on metabolic health. Akkermansia has been shown to improve insulin sensitivity, which means your cells can absorb glucose more efficiently and without triggering excessive insulin release. High insulin is one of the fastest ways to speed up aging. It promotes fat storage, increases inflammation, and activates pathways that break down tissue instead of building it. People with low Akkermansia levels often struggle with stubborn weight, especially around the midsection, because their insulin is chronically elevated. When Akkermansia levels rise, insulin tends to stabilize. And when insulin stabilizes, your body becomes much better at burning fat for fuel. In fact, several studies have shown that people with higher Akkermansia have significantly less visceral fat, the dangerous kind that surrounds organs and increases disease risk. Visceral fat is hormonally active, meaning it actually releases chemicals that increase inflammation and accelerate aging. So when Akkermansia helps reduce this fat, it's not just cosmetic. It's a deep metabolic reset that affects the entire body. Your immune system also depends on this bacteria. About 70 to 80% of your immune system resides in your gut. The cells in your intestines communicate constantly with immune cells to determine whether something is safe or harmful. If your gut bacteria are unbalanced, your immune system becomes confused. It may overreact to harmless food, underreact to pathogens, or become chronically irritated. Akkermansia helps train the immune system to stay balanced. It influences the production of regulatory T cells, the cells that keep your immune system from going into constant attack mode. When those cells are functioning properly, your immune system becomes more precise and less reactive. That means less inflammation, fewer sensitivities, and a much stronger defense against illness. What makes Akkermansia so special is that it acts like a central switch that controls multiple pathways related to aging. It influences inflammation, metabolism, cellular repair, gut barrier strength, immune function, and even brain health. Research shows that people with higher levels of this bacteria have better memory, less cognitive decline, and fewer markers of oxidative stress. That's because inflammation in the gut doesn't stay in the gut. It spreads throughout the body through something called the gut-brain axis. When your gut lining is strong and your inflammation is low, your brain experiences less stress and fewer inflammatory signals. Many people report that when they improve their gut health, they suddenly feel mentally sharper, clearer, calmer, and more focused. Akkermansia is a major part of that improvement. Now, here's the shocking part. Many people over the age of 40 have extremely low Akkermansia levels without knowing it. Modern diets, processed foods, Low fiber intake, stress, alcohol, lack of fasting, and medications like antibiotics destroy the natural environment this bacteria needs to survive. Even if someone is eating healthy by general standards, that doesn't mean their microbiome is thriving. If you've ever experienced bloating, fatigue, stubborn weight, blood sugar issues, food sensitivities, or skin problems, low Akkermansia could be a missing piece. It's also interesting to note that this bacteria is naturally more abundant in younger people and in individuals who live in traditional cultures with diets rich in natural plant compounds. Polyphenols, for example, are natural compounds found in deeply colored foods like berries and pomegranates. These compounds act as fuel and signals for Akkermansia. In cultures that eat these foods regularly, levels of this bacteria remain strong throughout life and the rates of metabolic disease are dramatically lower. This bacteria is also highly responsive to lifestyle patterns. It tends to grow in environments where the gut gets periods of rest, like when someone practices intermittent fasting or simply avoids constant snacking. That's because fasting helps strengthen the mucus layer and reduce the presence of harmful gut bacteria, giving Akkermansia space to multiply. It's one of the reasons fasting has such rapid anti-inflammatory effects. But the most important thing to understand is this: you don't need supplements or lab tests to begin supporting this bacteria. You simply need to create the conditions in your gut that encourage it to grow. When Akkermansia increases, your inflammation drops, your metabolism improves, your energy rises, and your aging process slows down from the inside out. It's one of the most efficient ways to take control of your long-term health. This is why researchers are calling it one of the most important biomarkers of longevity, not because it magically makes you younger, but because it influences so many systems that determine how young or old your body functions. When this bacteria is thriving, your internal environment becomes more youthful, more resilient, and more efficient. And once you know how to support it with food and daily habits, you give your body a powerful advantage in slowing down the aging process naturally. When people hear that the gut contains trillions of bacteria, they often imagine that all bacteria behave the same way or that they all feed on fiber. But the gut is far more complex than that. Each species has its own preferences, its own environment, and its own survival strategy. What makes Akkermansia mucinifila so unique is that it doesn't thrive on the same foods that most beneficial bacteria thrive on. It has a very specific fuel source, and when you understand what it prefers, you can grow this bacteria naturally simply by adjusting what you eat. The most powerful activators for Akkermansia are polyphenols. Polyphenols are natural plant compounds that give foods their deep color, their bitterness, their tartness, and their antioxidant effects. The darker and richer the color of a food, the more polyphenols it usually contains. These compounds not only feed beneficial bacteria, but they also act like communication signals, telling the gut to shift toward a healthier, more balanced microbial environment. What's interesting is that polyphenols often pass through your digestive system without being fully absorbed. Instead of being digested in the small intestine, they reach the colon, where the gut bacteria break them down and use them as fuel. Akkermansia happens to be one of the bacteria that responds most strongly to these compounds. So when you start eating more polyphenol-rich foods, you create the perfect environment for this longevity bacteria to expand. One of the best foods for boosting Akkermansia is pomegranate. Pomegranate seeds, pomegranate juice, and pomegranate extract are extremely rich in a type of polyphenol called elagitanins. These compounds are powerful antioxidants and they interact directly with the microbiome. Several studies have shown that pomegranate can increase Akkermansia levels significantly in just a few weeks. People often report better digestion, more stable blood sugar, reduced bloating, and even easier fat loss when they add pomegranate to their routine. It's not the fruit itself doing the magic, it's the bacteria responding to its compounds. Right behind pomegranate is cranberry. Cranberries are known for urinary tract health, but the real reason they're beneficial is because they're loaded with proanthocyanidins, a specific type of polyphenol that deeply influences gut bacteria. These compounds are highly effective at increasing Akkermansia populations. Even small amounts, like a few tablespoons of unsweetened cranberry juice or a handful of cranberries, can produce impressive changes in the microbiome. The key is choosing cranberries without added sugar, since sugar can reduce the benefits by feeding the wrong types of bacteria. Another excellent source of polyphenols is blueberries, especially wild blueberries. These small, dark berries pack a huge concentration of anthocyanins. These pigments give the berries their dark purple color and act like an anti-aging signal to the gut. Anthocyanins help reduce oxidative stress, strengthen the gut lining, and feed microbiota that control inflammation. Akkermansia is especially responsive to these compounds. When people incorporate blueberries into their diet consistently, they often experience better energy, improved digestion, and enhanced metabolic flexibility. One of the simplest and most daily, friendly foods for feeding Akkermansia is green tea. Green tea contains catechins, particularly EGCG, which influence gut microbiota composition. Catechins help reduce harmful bacteria while supporting beneficial species like Akkermansia. Drinking 1 or 2 cups of green tea a day is enough to create a noticeable shift in the gut environment. Some people even find that switching from coffee to green tea reduces stomach irritation and inflammation because green tea is gentler and more supportive of the gut lining. Another surprising but powerful food is real dark chocolate, ideally 85% cacao or higher. Cacao is extremely rich in polyphenols and contains compounds that function almost like prebiotics. These compounds support microbial diversity and selectively encourage the growth of Akkermansia. People who eat a small piece of dark chocolate daily often report improved mood, better digestion, and reduced cravings. That's because the gut and brain communicate constantly, and polyphenol-rich foods help stabilize that communication. Red onions, red cabbage, black currants, and purple carrots all fall into the same category. Anything dark red, purple, or blue is almost always loaded with anthocyanins, quercetin, flavonoids, and other polyphenols that feed beneficial microbes. These foods don't need to be eaten in large quantities to work. Even small, consistent servings can reshape the microbiome over time. There are also spices that strongly support Akkermansia. For example, cloves, cinnamon, ginger, and turmeric contain some of the most concentrated polyphenols of any foods. These spices help reduce inflammation in the gut, inhibit harmful bacteria, and create an environment where Akkermansia can flourish. A pinch of cinnamon in your tea, a sprinkle of clove in your meals, or some turmeric in a dish can make a real difference. But polyphenols aren't the only category of foods that help. Another key component is resistant starch. Resistant starch is a type of carbohydrate that the body cannot digest. Instead of turning into sugar, it travels to the colon and becomes fuel for beneficial bacteria. This process increases the production of butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid that repairs the gut lining and reduces inflammation. When butyrate levels increase, Akkermansia tends to increase as well because the environment becomes more stable and less inflamed. The best sources of resistant starch include green bananas, cooked and cooled potatoes, cooked and cooled rice, and soaked oats. The cooling process changes the structure of the starch, converting it into resistant starch that feeds the microbiome. People often underestimate how powerful this is. When the bacteria in your colon begin fermenting resistant starch, the gut lining becomes thicker and healthier, inflammation decreases, and insulin sensitivity improves. This creates ideal conditions for Akkermansia to thrive. Fermented foods can also indirectly support Akkermansia by improving overall microbial diversity. Foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, yogurt, miso, and kombucha introduce beneficial bacteria that help balance the gut ecosystem. Although they don't feed Akkermansia directly, they create a more resilient microbiome that allows Akkermansia to become more active. One of the most important things to understand is that you don't need huge amounts of these foods. It's more about consistency than quantity. A handful of berries, a cup of green tea, a spoonful of pomegranate seeds, a square of dark chocolate, or a serving of resistant starch can gradually shift your gut environment. When you supply these foods day after day, you send a constant signal to your microbiome. Akkermansia recognizes that signal and begins to expand naturally. What many people don't realize is that your gut bacteria are always shifting. They grow or shrink depending on what you feed them. If you eat foods that support inflammation like sugar, seed oils, processed snacks, alcohol, or artificial sweeteners, the harmful bacteria gain strength and crowd out the beneficial species. But when you switch to polyphenol-rich foods, the opposite happens. Harmful bacteria weaken, inflammation decreases, the gut lining becomes stronger, and Akkermansia starts rebuilding the mucus layer. This process doesn't happen overnight, but people often start feeling changes within a few days. They may notice that bloating goes down, digestion feels smoother, and energy feels more stable. Over time, deeper benefits emerge: better metabolism, improved fat burning, more stable blood sugar, clear skin, sharper mental clarity, and less inflammation throughout the body. Your microbiome is a living ecosystem, and food is the fastest way to change it. When you choose foods that feed Akkermansia, you're supporting the bacteria that support you. And because Akkermansia influences so many systems, from immune function to metabolic health to inflammation, it becomes one of the most powerful ways to promote longevity simply through everyday eating. One of the most overlooked truths about gut health and longevity is that certain foods and lifestyle habits can either create the perfect environment for good bacteria to multiply, or they can quietly destroy that environment day by day. And Akkermansia mucinifera, a bacteria deeply linked with slower aging, lower inflammation, better metabolic health, and stronger gut lining, is extremely sensitive to what you eat and how often you eat. It thrives in the right environment, but it quickly disappears in the wrong one. Understanding this balance is the key to making this bacteria work in your favor. Let's start with something people do every day without thinking: constant eating, snacking all day, having small meals every couple of hours, sipping on sugary drinks, or grazing from morning until night doesn't just affect your blood sugar, it affects your microbiome. Akkermansia thrives during periods of rest, especially when the gut isn't constantly filled with food. When you give your digestive system a break, something interesting happens. The mucus layer in the gut begins to rebuild, harmful bacteria decrease, and Akkermansia begins to expand. This is why intermittent fasting is so powerful for gut health. Even a simple schedule, like eating within a 68-hour window and fasting the rest of the day, gives the gut the time it needs to repair. Akkermansia loves this environment. When the gut lining isn't being constantly stressed by incoming food or insulin spikes, this bacteria uses the downtime to strengthen the protective mucus layer, lower inflammation, and restore microbiome balance. It's one of the reasons fasting often leads to better digestion, more energy, sharper thinking, and improved metabolic health within days. But just as important as giving your gut a rest is avoiding foods that actively damage the mucus layer. Seed oils, which are found in most packaged and fried foods, are highly unstable and oxidize easily. These oils increase inflammation in the gut and can thin the mucus barrier over time. When the mucus layer weakens, Akkermansia struggles to survive because it relies on that environment for nourishment. This is why people who eat fast food, deep-fried meals, or packaged snacks regularly often have extremely low levels of this bacteria without even realizing it. Refined sugar is another major culprit. Sugar feeds inflammatory microbes that grow rapidly and compete with Akkermansia. When these microbes take over, they produce toxins and byproducts that weaken the gut lining and create an inflammatory environment. Akkermansia cannot thrive in this environment. Many people notice that when they cut back on sugar, even just a little, they start feeling lighter, less bloated, and more clear-headed. That shift often comes from the microbiome beginning to rebalance. Artificial sweeteners can be even more damaging. Substances like sucralose, aspartame, and acesulfame potassium have been shown to alter gut bacteria in ways that reduce microbial diversity and increase inflammation. These sweeteners may not contain calories, but they send confusing signals to the gut and can suppress the growth of beneficial bacteria. Akkermansia is particularly sensitive to them, and people who consume diet sodas and artificially sweetened foods often unknowingly suppress this important anti-aging bacteria. Alcohol, especially when consumed regularly, is another stressor. It irritates the gut lining, disrupts the mucus layer, and increases permeability. When the gut barrier becomes leaky, inflammation rises, and Akkermansia populations decline. Alcohol doesn't need to be eliminated entirely, but reducing frequency and choosing less irritating forms, like small amounts of dry red wine, can help protect the gut environment. A completely overlooked category that impacts gut bacteria is food additives. Emulsifiers, which are used to improve texture in packaged foods, can thin the mucus layer and alter microbial composition. They're found in ice cream, salad dressings, sauces, non-dairy creamers, packaged breads, and even some healthy protein bars. These ingredients weren't designed with your gut in mind, and Akkermansia reacts negatively to them. When people clean up their diet and remove hidden additives, they often experience noticeable improvements in digestion because the gut lining begins to heal. Antibiotics are another factor that dramatically affects Akkermansia. While antibiotics can be necessary in some cases, they also eliminate beneficial microbes along with harmful ones. Akkermansia is highly sensitive to antibiotics and can take months to recover. This is why supporting the gut with polyphenol-rich foods and resistant starch becomes even more important after antibiotic use. It helps repopulate the bacteria naturally. But here's the encouraging part. Reducing these harmful inputs doesn't have to be complicated. Small, consistent changes can dramatically shift your gut environment. Replacing seed oils with olive oil, avocado oil, or coconut oil reduces inflammatory stress. Cutting down on sugar and artificial sweeteners removes competition for Akkermansia. Choosing whole foods over processed snacks eliminates the additives that thin the mucus layer. And spacing out your meals gives your gut time to heal and rebuild. Another powerful strategy involves supporting beneficial short-chain fatty acids, especially butyrate. Butyrate is a compound created when the gut bacteria ferment fiber and resistant starch. It nourishes the gut lining, reduces inflammation, and creates an environment where Akkermansia thrives. People who eat foods that support butyrate production often experience better digestion and less bloating. This is why foods like green bananas, cooked and cooled rice, cooked and cooled potatoes, and fermented foods can indirectly assist Akkermansia by stabilizing the overall microbiome. There's also a fascinating connection between stress and the microbiome. Chronic stress increases cortisol, which weakens the gut lining and increases permeability. When the gut barrier becomes compromised, Akkermansia levels naturally decrease. Practices like deep breathing, spending time in sunlight, walking, and improving sleep can dramatically improve gut health because they lower inflammation and restore balance to the microbiome. Many people underestimate how connected their mood and digestion are, but the gut and brain communicate constantly, and when one is stressed, the other suffers. Movement also plays a role. Light exercise like walking, stretching, or strength training helps increase circulation to the gut and supports microbial diversity. It's not about burning calories, it's about reducing systemic inflammation. A body with lower inflammation is a body where Akkermansia can flourish. One of the most encouraging things about this bacteria is how quickly it responds to positive changes. When people remove gut disruptors, increase polyphenol-rich foods, and adopt a fasting window, even a small one, they often notice improvements within days to weeks. Digestion becomes smoother, bloating decreases, blood sugar stabilizes, energy rises, and overall inflammation drops. Over time, these improvements accumulate and slow the aging process from the inside out. The modern lifestyle filled with processed foods, sugar, grazing all day, artificial sweeteners, and chronic stress works against this bacteria, but the human body is incredibly adaptable. When you make intentional choices, even small ones, the microbiome responds in ways that ripple throughout your entire system. Supporting Akkermansia means supporting your immune system, your metabolism, your gut lining, your brain health, and ultimately your longevity. Your gut bacteria are always listening to what you feed them and how you treat your body. When you choose foods and habits that reduce inflammation, strengthen the gut lining, and clean up the digestive environment, you create the perfect conditions for Akkermansia to thrive. And when this bacteria thrives, you feel younger, stronger, and more resilient, not just today, but for years to come.